Welcome to the first edition of Investment Innovation in the Amazon Bioeconomy Forum, brought to you by the initiative called Orchestrated Action for the Amazon, Sustainable Development of the Legal Amazon. We understand that the Amazon biodiversity has unique elements for all humanity to live better. Not only the fauna and flora important for health, but the regulation of the climate in the world. People, the cultures, arts, soils, waters, communities. We believe that keeping the Amazon sustainable and alive involves everybody here. To conserve biodiversity using science and technology allied to the sustainable development, always seeking better conditions of living for all that are here. We want not only to keep the forest standing, but we want more standing forests, more biodiverse and sustainable, less social and territorial inequalities. Understand that the Amazon bioeconomy, economical activities, and commercial activities from this diversity is a great ally to the sustainable development we seek. So we invite you to participate in investment innovations in the Amazon Bioeconomy Forum. We want to bring new voices to debate, get to know different experiences and points of view on this market, finding synergies and ways to have a more prosperous and resilient Amazon. There are talks for everybody, seeking investment, options to invest, people who propose public policies, everybody who wants to understand more on bioeconomy in the Amazon. Shall we? Good afternoon. My name is Annelise Vendramini. I'm the coordinator of Sustainable Finance Program in São Paulo. It's a great pleasure to be here, more than moderating, talk with these very, very much to tell us on the challenges, viabilization of investment in bioeconomy. We have Prado, who represents BASA. We have Karina Learth, Santander. We have Nabil Kadri, representing BNDS. Brazilian banking system has advanced operation of environmental, social, and governance areas that we really actually call environmental risk several decades. This is a relatively new topic on the capital market, but in the banking market, concerns with connections with environmental risks is not new. Brazilian central bank has regulated this way. Have commitments since the 90s. We count on the Green Protocol, for example, initiative of public banks. Sustainability issues are not frozen. They move around, and the complexity of this agenda has become even greater, and the challenges of viabilization or financing activities associated to the concept of bioeconomy has also been growing. These are challenges for us to meet ways financing of activities through the banking market or capital market. In this panel, we will discuss a little of these challenges, bringing light on discussions of taxonomy that happens in Brazil, scope of the FEBRABAN, but also nationally, and the incorporation of concepts of bioeconomy in this taxonomy and other initiatives that are currently going on in the banking market. It's a good talk, I promise. To begin, I would like to ask Esmar, representative of BASA, to offer us a perspective of a bank that has a regional presence. Very important. Pleasure to have you here. You have the floor. Good afternoon, and everybody watching us through social media. Afternoon, Carolina, Nabil. Would first like to thank name of the Amazon Bank opportunity. It's a very challenging topic for us to talk about. This panorama is posed for us to discuss. I would like to make a small introduction. The Amazon Bank completely is 79 years old. It was developed since the Second World War and changed a lot, but now it's consolidated as the Bank of the Amazon. Went through the rubber credit bank, but now we are the Bank of the Amazon. Sustainability issue is within not only our values, but in our mission as well. We have to develop a sustainable Amazon credits applied. The term sustainability we have emphasized a lot because the bank, not only just the bank, but society as well, are not able to see the development, economic and social development in the Amazon region without the pillar of sustainability. Much more than a mere legal demand, it is a necessity, moral necessity that we have with the current generation, also the future generation. Looking at the historical evolution, when we talk about credit directly, from late 90s, this topic of sustainability is much more evident in our institution. This is a pressing matter, mandatory issue, especially on bioeconomy. Still don't have very precise data on this, and but about sustainable part of what we call green credit, we estimate that 90% of our credit is limes. This year, bringing even more transparency, this methodology of assessment, bank inaugurated specific classifications like the green economy, which brings some different factors for people who access credit, just deadlines and participation percentages that are larger, and we expect to even more transparency, this strategic positioning of the bank that the bank seeks regarding green economy, sustainable economy. About bioeconomy, have as a perception of as a barrier so we can advance even more in credits for this segment. Issues related to the environmental part has been limiting the advance on that. About investment in bioeconomy, can start structuring the design of the business and financial support. When we get to the environmental part, not only how slow it is, but how difficult it is to get the licenses that are necessary, has hindered the access to this. So, in an initial panorama, in the end, with the other speeches, we will open to discussions, of course. But in this context, I see that we have huge opportunity area. We still need to advance a lot, especially in public policies, so we can unlock factors that are alien to this way of accessing credit and other funds. I appreciate and I am at your disposal for the debate. Thank you, Esmar. Thank you for your initial considerations. No doubt we'll be able to go back and exchange ideas on the development of this region, financing and development. Thank you. Carolina, it's a pleasure to see you here in this event. I know about Santander and I'm watching you guys, not only activities and strategy, but also as a part of FEBRABAN. There are many challenges financing of activities more associated to green economy. And quote some legal insecurity, the lack of what we call legal enforcement is still a challenge in several regions in the country. For example, the forest code, that we are still walking very slowly on the enforcement of this code. There are several challenges here in Brazil. But as other banks, the Brazilian banking system has leaded and headed the pushing of this agenda. You have seen opportunities and risks, but have followed on with the agenda. So I want you to tell us a little bit how you see the challenges of the agenda and how you guys are doing it and how you see the future for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annelise. It's very good to see you again. It's a pleasure to be participating in this debate. Well, I'll tell you what we are doing, what is the view of the bank in this economy that you were mentioning that we call transition economy, to make the link what we have to deal with now in order to promote the business transformations that they need. Bioeconomy clearly is the hot topic now, since even when we talk about the Amazon, and it is a topic that we know that it is a box that it has a huge potential, but there is a lot of things to be clarified. But undoubtedly, it is a topic that we have been looking very closely. I will tell you the trajectory of the bank over the last year. We made viable 27 billion in sustainable business in the last year, so this is a very important number in the institution. We have sanitation, renewable sources, sustainable activities, and for agribusiness, we call it the agribusiness that is productive and sustainable, that responds to the challenge of the future, that is to feed people and also live and make these assets on environmental preservation. So in this 27 billion, we have this included. What did we do after last year? And I think most of our spectators know that we launched, along with Itaú and Bradesco, the Amazon plan. This is in the Amazon context, with 10 measures that are going to support the sustainable development in the region with a huge humility. That does not mean that the three banks will work together and everything is going to be transformed. It's not like that, but we understand the deducting help role of the financial sector. So making good businesses, doing good businesses, and the business that does not hurt, does not deforestate, does not create slavery, that is according to the law, this is basic, this is the minimum. But the truth is that from now on, what are the sectors that will drive and make this a business opportunity for the bank? I think this is the spirit of the Amazon plan. Bioeconomy was one of the priorities defined. So we prioritized 4 topics. Actually, one of them was land regulation. This is also a very delicate topic to Brazil because it involves different levels of the government, not only the private sector. And we need to be careful not to reduce this theme because it is important. We prioritized bioeconomy, sustainable cultures, and I'll tell you a little bit about this later. And then the other is livestock and how do we engage the industry with all the aims here in order to neutralize the illegal deforestation here. So these are the 4 topics that we prioritize, and we have been working with a notable council along with the top management of the bank. I will talk about Santander at the Amazon, so in order for us to have an idea. So we invest in Amazon since forever, but as part of the business, there was never a specific look to the region. As we were looking at other regions, we were also at the Amazon, which is transformed in the beginning of this year, and I'll tell you why. But regarding infrastructure, we invested 16 billion to finance the projects. We have the agribusiness 1.4 billion portfolio, the traditional business according to the legislation. 13 partner universities in the Santander universities with 87 branches, 1,200 employees, and 500,000 customers. So this is the type of the size of Santander in the region. And we are growing exponentially in this region. In the beginning of this year, we launched a North Amazon network. So Rondônia, Paraíba, and Amazon are included in this network. When I talk about the look, is all the particularities, the peculiarities of the region under our nose with a lot of concern. So assess environmental risks in the region, assess different opportunities. There are some numbers here that we have in surveys, numbers of the Brazilian Statistic Institution. We have 76%, 76 billion in transactions in the region, and 45% of these transactions are made in cash. So it is very informal. This region, 30% of the population do not have access to drinking water, drinkable water. 74% does not have access to water treatment and sewage treatment. So looking at business in this region is a totally different thing. So the idea of Santander is to create this network. In terms of bioeconomy, we are supporting through the Amazon plan, we are supporting a study that's going to bring us more clarity about the main routes of bioeconomy in the region and to understand why our products. I know that bioeconomy has a larger size than what I'm going to mention here, but it's not only monoculture, extractivism, and forest culture. This is far from it. But if you look to the size of the Brazil nut markets abroad and the pepper market, we are really small. So inside the Amazon plan, we are working in a more clear understanding on how these cultures can mean more in the international market and occupy a greater share. Santander is launching 2 months ago a line of 50 billion reais for cooperatives and agro industries of forest products and timber and non-timber products in the region in order to foster these productive chains, but with a huge challenge. It is a challenge because it is informal. There is a lack of knowledge, lack of financial education. We need organization of their businesses themselves. So the perspective is that we can work and learn from the region so we can provide everything that is financial and non-financial that is part of this equation, where clearly if you do not have these non-financial side of the things, we cannot thrive the financial thing. So in general, this is what the bank is doing. This is our vision for the region. Of course, we want to learn bioeconomy. We want bioeconomy to become an industry of our economy. I think we're going to talk about taxonomy and many other things that we need for this to happen. But surely we believe strongly that this will be an important industry in the Brazilian GDP from now on. Thank you. So we hope Carolina, so things can go on this direction and it become important to the GDP. We had a study to understand what would be the impacts on the GDP of multiplying by 10 the sustainable management areas. And the results was not very expressive because the baseline, the starting point was not very high. So the legalized business were not representative in the GDP. So multiplying by 10 wouldn't have a great effect. So we have a long way to go for these things to thrive. So thank you very much for your initial words. Now, Nabil, I think you have a good link to talk about BNDS now, not only because of the experience of the Amazon Fund, that is something that you can tell us about the learning, the lessons learned, but why many things that Carolina said in our surveys confirm that we do have an institutional business an environment in the Amazon that is different, that requires a regionalized view with certain peculiarities that makes it even more difficult for the financial activities and bank loans. We saw this in the programs, and there is a role for development banks that is wonderful. So I would like to hear from you. What is the look of the BNDS for this region? What you have thought about, and what can you share with us about this topic? Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Annelise and my fellow panelists. I had the opportunity to work with Carol with wonderful debates in the ESG agenda. It's a pleasure to be with you again. And Esmar, our partner as a development bank in the Amazon region, I could say that it is a brother bank. This is our big brother. I don't know if everyone knows, but BASA was created 10 years before BNDS, exactly 10 years before. And coincidentally, this week, June 20th, BNDS turned 69 years old. So BASA is 79 years old, acting in the region, and we arrived 10 years later. So it is a pleasure to be part of these debates today in the same week that the bank turns 69. So in these 69 years, the bank is related to the environmental area. BNDS since the 90s, even before the Rio 92 conference, we created the first environment unit. We were the first bank in Brazil to create a unit dedicated to the environmental issues in 92. We had the Rio conference, and what is very interesting is that directing our attentions to the Amazon and the development plans in the region, we remember that BNDS in the 90s or 1994 launched a plan of integrated development for the Amazon. It was called PIES, with many different legs, which is interesting from one side and very sad to the other, because we get this plan of 1994 and we look at the legs here, they are the same as today. The challenges are very similar. So 30 years later, we still have similar challenges, development dynamics that couldn't change toward dynamics towards the evaluation of biodiversity of the region. So since that moment, we see that national willingness to find different ways that values not only the wealth that exists in the biodiversity, but at the same time that take an improvement in the quality of life for those who live there. We know that unfortunately the North region took the position of a region with for most critical social issues nationally, as Carolina just mentioned. We have serious problems in terms of sanitation, health, education, and these cannot be forgotten. We have to look at the evaluation of the ecosystem and the evaluation of the Amazon biodiversity, also looking to the people, to the population who lives in the forest, lives from the forest, and in the urban centers that has direct relationship with the biome But this brings another point. We, in 1994 until now, in the halfway, the bank acquires a complex experience in the region through the management of the Amazon funds. The Amazon fund in these 13 years is a great origin of actions that were successful in some cases, and some lessons learned the other. So what can we do differently than what we did before? And the way to deal with sustainable production, bioeconomy in the beginning of 2008 or 2009 indicated challenges that are different from the current challenges. So in this journey of the last 13 years of work related directly to the reduction of pressure for deforestation and generation of value in biodiversity chains, we realized that first we need to have distinct models of work. And the bank has innovated creating binding partners, selection of small projects, because there is no use in thinking about local development without having the necessary capillarity. We need to be closer to the riverside communities, to the indigenous communities. We have to be closer to the slave descendants because they are part of their process of production and maintenance of the ecosystems, of preservation of the biome. So the bank has learned a lot from the management of the Amazon fund, but at the same time, we have other instruments that we have worked in order to converge with the sustainable development agenda in the region. Last week, we launched the Garage Notebook. I don't know if you know that. This is a program of startup acceleration called BNDS Garage. And this year, we are going to have a new round. And we decided to have notebooks of sectorial challenges. And one of these notebooks is about sustainability. And we could include bioeconomy inside this. So we have tried to use the instruments and the other sources of resources that the bank has as the linked loans that we developed with the non-reversible for innovation and the stimulus to innovative entrepreneurship with this look of bioeconomy of forest based. Since we are talking about taxonomy and concepts, Brazil is a power in bioeconomy. This is a fact for many decades. But in the bioeconomy, looking at commodities or agricultural bioeconomy, it is time for us to become a power in forest bioeconomy, bioeconomy of the ecosystems, have all the means necessary to make this happen. So the bank has been looking at this, focusing on the forest-based bioeconomy. This is where we find the gaps, whether they are instruments or funding, so they can in fact exercise out the potential that they have.
So we seek to observe our instruments, credit and non-refundable and participation, and how we can align them with this look. My initial statement, I have a lot to talk about. Each part of this has unfoldings, and I think it's better for us to continue the debate, have the joint construction with other participants. Thank you, Nabil. Your scenery there is wonderful. All the bioeconomy behind you, and the sound as well, yes. The lamb, cold here, it's raining, so it's wonderful with your screen. Thank you for sharing with us. I think some topics are surfacing here are interesting for us to get in. But before that, I would like to call for the graphical representation and shows us a little bit of the result of this initial conversation. Wow, Very interesting, Clara. I think you have been able to capture very well the challenges here. You can explore several of these connections that you analyze. We are still working on this, lots to present, a lot of incentives. It's important to say that all of these panels will be available on the website of the event and website of Página 22 as well. We thank you. I took note here of several ideas for us to discuss here on the second round of our panel. I would like to talk about transition economy that Carolina brought. I like this tag because we are in a big transition with all the challenges, transitioning consumerism or economic model for a model that is more aligned with principles of sustainability and where bioeconomy would fit, especially incorporating the concepts of bioeconomy, the concepts of digital transformation, new technologies, high level of innovation. So I would like to ask our experiences that you represent can maybe share with us in this notion of transition economy, financing of transition, say one or two aspects that, in your opinion, would be priority, should be prioritized as a nation. What would you quote here as priorities for this transition economy? Of course, considering regional particularity, talking about Amazon, that a lot of different locations. Carolina, go ahead, please. First thing that comes to mind is the conditions can see the transition. That an important word there, that entrepreneurship and innovation have important social challenges, especially in the Amazon region. Bioeconomy is not a specific topic for the Amazon, but world. In Brazil, it is a large topic, but we have to solve the problem, simpler problems first. We have to create the basic conditions actually so we can innovate the region. Now, looking at the perspective of the tour, we talked to a lot of them. The region we did made a trip, our team and the part of the sustainability team went really into the forest to understand it. And there's something kind of Brazilian there about leadership, personal leadership, and will to break the barriers and make it work. There are several levels because we're talking about breaking barriers in completely different if we do it in a rich part of Sao Paulo and to do it in the forest with the different challenges. And but we are capable of finding leaders anywhere in this country, in any dimension of business. The extreme, we're talking about something very simple, water and sanitation, calm. But for us to find people in wants to innovation among so many factors are the first that come to mind. Thank you, Nabil, Esmar. If I could complement, I think we have a scenario nowadays very challenging, especially with the pandemic. When the pandemic is controlled adequately, resume growth and sustainable growth in the country, the opportunity we have to seek are more amicable for this transition economy. Sure, the country has already done spectacular work, design of energy matrix, for an example. There are several challenges from other countries in the world. We have been able to have clean matrix, especially on the generation of energy. Have huge challenges with the of energy in sector, patient, for example, industry. There's a way to be walked on for us to have an agenda that is more. I've talked about this in other forums. Climate agenda and environmental agenda, an agenda of quality of life, not only just think to something very distant. Talk about changing several years from now, an agenda for today. Citizen living in the city wants to have a more amicable city with less pollution, less noisy cars. The electric car is less noisy. And if we look at the development, looking at people, aiming at quality of life for people, we will surely have a more amicable development for the environment as well. What we're talking about. On one hand, we have necessity of being able to translate this agenda of the environmental challenges. Conventional person wakes up 5 a.m., takes the bus, commutes for 3 hours, and talking about climate change, forestation, person needs to feel part of that agenda of transformation, national trend. Needs sometimes to more of this tangibility questions. Because when we talk about the Amazon biome, don't have this many times. It's almost a caricature in the south or the southeast, something that is not reachable. Have not only life ships, as Carol said, working in the region generates dynamics that potentialized by a more sustainable agenda or by a no, not such sustainable one. Weigh these round. I would this reflection I would like to on how much we make the agenda tangible, climate agenda, bioeconomy agenda, point of view, people who are there in the daily lives, with the possibility of being a real player in the change. What say about the economy? Perfect, Nabil. Points that Carolina and Nabil mentioned already bring amplitude, almost 100% level. I'd like to complement on what has been mentioned already, topic of this discussion. What is surprising somehow, as both panelists put very well, is the potential wealth find, especially in the Amazon, and the disparity that we assess in relation to people who live here. It has been very precisely put, issue of the social abyss that we see south and the southeast have no idea of what we see here in Amazon. Some information I'll bring so we can try to illustrate this. 7 states of the northern region have 450 municipalities. Annually, operating in all the 450 municipalities, no exception. There are municipalities who want to have operations there and to make the credit reach these municipalities in a simple way, challenge all these factors. Carolina, very precisely, lack of training, reality, land-wise, environmental laws sometimes have no are not very well organized in the system and conservation. It's mostly punitive for the people who are developing activity, and it forces people who live in the Amazon to go to formality, to illegal part where the public policy power cannot even support because it's not within the law. There are points that we need to look at really a much more attentive way. I would like say in a more caring way from public power so we can change. Change will continue to be very slow as we see year after year. Carolina observed about the leaderships and here in the Amazon, specifically Amazonas and Roraima, have 62 municipalities in the Amazon, and Roraima we have 15 municipalities. I'm from Roraima. I know all of the municipalities. And from the 62 here in the Amazon, I know 54. I'm 8 short of the whole Amazonas state. People who have this opportunity of going there have this dimension. I can't put it in words here what I've been able to see, this peregrination that I've done. So I end here on this tone, complementing what has been put very well by Nabil and Carolina, this necessity for us to look more attentively, directed political will for the development to happen in a more equal way, scattering the wealth because it's very large and sometimes it's operational in the region. And this data is fantastic. In the Amazonas state, 97% of the state is for us to reflect on. Elisa is talking from São Paulo, right? Yes, from the concrete jungle. How much of São Paulo is preserved? Up to what point some people who are in the south and the southeast can actually propose public policies that are balanced for all the country? I'll leave this as a final thought here.
Thank you very much, Esmar. I think that I would like to take what Nabil said to make it tangible, and Esmar also mentioned this as well, to make it tangible for people to be clear about what our challenges are and the benefits generated by an environmental agenda. What are the social benefits of an environmental agenda? So there is nothing so isolated, preservation by preservation, but to make it closer to people. And then we are in this moment working with WWF in a research project that involves bioeconomy in the concept of Amazon 4.0 and ways to make viable a regional economy aligned with these principles. And the first step in this research product was to understand what we are talking about when we talk about bioeconomy. What is this bioeconomy? How do we make this more clear? Because what I could perceive is based only on my experience. But I could realize that there are many different understandings and many concepts about bioeconomy. And when we enter other concepts that are associated with the idea of bioeconomy, natural capital, for example, natural capital, nature, ecosystem services, payment for environmental services, all these topics related, they coexist in the same set of ideas, but they are different things. So when we go to the banking activity, what is funded? Only the economic sectors, the economic activities. This is the base of the credit analysis. And then we need to match these two different worlds because that's how we operationalize the credit. So I would like to hear from you, from your perspective, what do you understand as the concept of bioeconomy? What are the economic activities that are included in this umbrella of bioeconomy in the Amazon context? If we were to think the ones that are the first ones or the easiest ones to be funded, because I understand what Carolina said from research and our experience, that the reality of different economic sectors are different inside the same region. We are talking about institutional contexts that are really different. For example, the land regulation is a very relevant topic that stops many activities from getting the funding. So this is going to act in many sectors differently. So I would like to hear from you. What do you understand? What economic activities will be encompassed under the umbrella of bioeconomy, and which one of them could be the starting point? What could starting point for the revolution or for these events? I don't know. Yeah, I can start. Well, in this proposal of debate, I will put two different umbrellas. At least in a preliminary way, it brings me this perception. I can see very clearly activities from the agroforestry segment and some of them related to the industry. We can bring these concepts in a more objective way about the bioeconomy. You also brought to the discussion what is being seen when we mention the financial sector, financial system. Surely we need first to have an a well-defined economic thing. When you think about the credit, we assume a reimbursement and then a payment and then a reimbursement. We need to have a start and middle and an end and a logical sequence so we can generate revenue for the payment. But today, I am sure that not only the Amazon Bank, but Santander from BNDS, the economic thing by itself is not enough. The evaluation of the aspects of environmental reflections and social reflections prevail more than the economic thing. I had here many different opportunities in which the business from the economic perspective made sense, but looking at the environmental and social impact, it doesn't make sense anymore. So we have to find this balance. Nabil talked about this a few minutes ago. We have to focus more on this. Just to try to bring more clarity to what I'm saying, I'm going to mention here a venture supported by the bank in the municipality of Tefé, mid Solimões River in the state of the Amazon. There was an industry related to the Brazil nut. Economically, we could see some issues that brought some question marks, some concerns to us. But looking at the environmental and social aspects to see the size of the chain that it would systematize and number of communities that would be benefited from this economic activity. This was important for the bank to have the appetite and the willingness to support. So in this context that I would include these concerns and these questions. At all? Okay, I think the biggest challenge to all of us, when you ask me how much the bank puts in bioeconomy, I don't know. I have to be very honest. No one will have this answer probably. But there is a work to understand. I agree with Esmar. This is a starting point to talk about agroforestry, to talk about the industry that benefits the producers of the agroforestry. But this is economy as it is. But productive chains, how much you can go down in the chains. We're talking about a sector that is driving this so-called bioeconomy. So this is a point for us to think. Since the moment that we remove the acai until it reaches Europe or in the south here, this is in theory it's bioeconomy. So there is something as the branches in the capillarization from the product itself or that forest assets. These are things that match this calculation in my head here. And all the derivations, for example, the carbon market certainly is something that we have to include in this calculation. All the genetic assets of the forest, and we have been talking about this, how do we use genomics as a precious asset? We do not sell our assets itself, but we sell the intelligence that is in the plants and animals. So very sophisticated sectors and basic sectors that can fit this calculation. But I think that we are not clear what we have. But I remember what you said in the beginning, because we did this work in the FEBRABAN, that to map sectors of green economy, and why not make association here, initial association of sectors of bioeconomy in this green economy sector without forgetting, when we talk about the transition economy, there are some sectors that are not obvious, but can participate in this bioeconomy. For example, the pharma industry or petrochemical industry that can work with assets from the Brazilian biodiversity, contributing to the GDP of the bioeconomy here. So these are concepts, as you said, we have to create a concept on that and define a path to start measuring. Okay, Nabil, I think there is an important point in this part of our debate that this year, probably we're going to have in October or in the beginning of next year, the COP15 that is about biodiversity. So since we have a very diverse audience in our panel today, it's good to remember that this is a discussion that is not specified here. We have a huge discussion to understand the goals that are linked to biodiversity slash economy of natural resources after 2020, and in a very distinct way of what happened in COP in Paris in 2015, where the financial sector organized itself after the Paris Agreement about the TCFD, managing to make the reports and creating indicators, how it influences or impacts the climate. This year, there was a different movement. The financial sector started to organize itself even before the definition of the frame. But the TNFD, the BNDS is part since the beginning of the discussion of TNFD. It was launched 10 days ago. If I'm not mistaken, there was a formal launch of the TNFD, but it was a 1 year work, including many international financial organizations to launch this working group, not only before the COP15, but also after COP15. So the debate about taxonomy, about what it is and what it isn't, depends on how we dialogue and how we report in these international standards. I think this is an important movement of FEBRABAN to follow. And from the Brazilian perspective, this is even more interesting. Look at the diversity of our table today, our panel. We have a consolidated banking system with a diversity of players. We have the National Bank of the Development. We have public banks that are federal. We have commercial banks, all of them with their own space without any shadowing. And there are in some cases some competition, but we have a robust banking system with many players and credit cooperatives that are different from other countries, that only the commercial banks and only can act. So it's important that Brazil is in this discussion for these two reasons. For being a power in the economy of natural resources, not only because of the biomes that we have here, the diversity of biomes, but also what the richness in terms of water. We are talking about the forests, but the waters, the oceans. Brazil has a huge potential, huge coastline. So we have to be well positioned. And we have a peculiar financial system. So BNDS have tried to follow these international discussions, bringing the Brazilian opinion and Brazilian ideas, but we have to make an internal reflection. So internally, we have made this reflection about what bioeconomy we need to put more light on. As I said, Brazil is already a power in bioeconomy, but probably we do not account for appropriately in order to be compared to other countries as European Union that is ahead of us in this agenda.
In our case, we have dedicated internal discussion to understand bioeconomy linked to the ecosystem. Basic bioeconomy for natural resources, biodiversity, which is where we realize that in the first statement, there are still gaps in lack of understanding of the talk about financial system. We have to talk about business. They know very well and knows that Santander is part of this. How manage to zero to almost 100% of wind power 1 decade? Finding the adequate model, of guarantee financing fits that model. There's still steps from the real understanding of the business model in forest. We have been able to very well in the paper and cellulose area. We are a power world scenario for how do we find model linking local production to maintenance of biome, aligning with financial instruments, only credit, guarantee. See package that must hand in hand with the debate, with maturing of models. We have had this internal discussion with discussion of the carbon market, paying for environmental services, sectors that are not real. Tourism, for example, just to sector is the existence of biome is bioeconomy, basic factor for us. What is bioeconomy? Economy that needs biome needs to be balanced, that economical activity developed, characterizing concept economical activity balance of the system. So it is bioeconomy. It is experience. It is bioeconomy. Fauna and flora needs there. Otherwise, it so we have worked internally, reflecting, talking a lot with our partners, public policy, education, economy, environmental. Have been trying to seek element positioning, as mentioned, we were in garage, just the focus incentives technology fund. Talk about energy. Point I would like to bring to the table here. You also have to think about the infrastructure that are adequate for this type of economy. While we have focused biome, have different distribution of solar panels, access to internet, have the riverways. Well, very important role for the banks, us and BASA have to look when we state finance. Thank you, Nabil. Very interesting and pull on several threads here that are key question of stabilization of bioeconomy. Model of business issue is very important. It's not one solution. Financial instrument is working for the model, not the other way around. We have to think of the available and stabilize these situations with blended finance, not just credit, as you put, Nabil. I'd like to turn to the taxonomy, why we started here in 2015 with Febraban heading the effort, pioneer initiative, trying to consolidate economical ones that are more associated with economy and associated with the brown economy. I have to make a disclaimer here. The objective for us to this classification is not to demonize any sector, but there are sectors, so-called brown economy, need of. The objective is to manage socio-environmental environment adequately, allied to green economy, because if we don't have adequate management, not because essence they contribute to economy, they will deliver that. They need to be managed correctly, otherwise they won't deliver. It's the objective of the assessment. Febraban in Brazil, we have advanced since effort. Started with Febraban in the beginning of 2015, and then we left. They continued pioneer initiative in the world. This is very noticeable. Any reflection on public policies, advances done, number, a diagnosis, way to go. Taxonomy in the European Union has legal power. They have a prediction of legal enforcement for this year, companies next year, for them mandatory for them to report the economical activities developed according to some sectors, some topics related to sustainability, climate change, adaptation to changes, protections of river and ocean resources, prevention and control of pollution, and protection of biodiversity and ecosystems. In what is the F for taxonomy? It's a very wide topic associated to important agenda of investment of sustainability, but we have to connect this financial activities. What the Brabant did here still was that education of economical activities in the country connects these topics, crossing through with the social and economical activity have their own classifications, but we have to look at it and how to classify these activities looking at the sustainability point of view. Have to make sure everybody speaks the same language because maybe one considers that one activity is not or it is connected to bioeconomy. Maybe we won't or will include maybe of the activity due to the activity they are performing, it is going to be connected. We don't have infrastructure that makes sense for the development of bioeconomy, so in different ways. We have two worlds of taxonomy. Brazil, headed by Febraban, is a pioneer effort, and in the world, especially with the Union, has full power. For an investor operating, you have to report accordingly. We have observed that several companies in Brazil, I'm sure that the banks also have national investors, European investors, also have to report accordingly to the Union. So there's a race to organize the information according to economies. I'd like to, guys, how do you see the scenario of organizations of nations and to work financial operation and understand how this economical activity is connected to topics? How do you see? I think Nabil could start because he hasn't started any of the conversations. Yeah, I could. Let's rotate. Yeah, this is the easiest one. So realize important for have the taxonomy national or national. Elise mentioned a factor that especially situations like greenwashing, rainbow, that we have two issues by this methodology, transparency. When you have fact that the methodology measuring, on the other hand, you have transparency, financial have environments that are cooperative. The reason there is a factor of competitive about positioning, taxonomy not being there on their method. So the way they're positioning, whether it's business positions, point in central bank. Have no for us as financial institutions have literally put agenda about sustainability, but public calls that especially 82, 85, and 86, all related management focused to a culture poses that bring the labeling categorization of the product activity sustainable culture and advancing climate agenda, other public consultation. Very important channel in Brazil happened. Central bank. Companies central bank. Government's role is very BNDS is crucial part of but participate in all chambers as guests, partners. How important was when Febraban was made labeling of green economy and sustainable development. They counting information central bank ourselves. Number of steps is already less integrity information. Very important. I'd like to bring another factor here. Talk a lot about taxonomy, especially because of words of effectiveness. Everybody wants to talk about that. Did number of hectares, any families dependent, excellent, important to communicate that. Something else we have to look at sometimes goes noticed when we talk about infrastructure. Everybody talks about basic sanitation. Why doesn't anybody go there and install the plumbing because it is visible as a bridge? Look about the environmental management in the financial system. It doesn't help to have if you the adequate management of that project. An example that is apart from environmental, be clear. I can have in my report 10,000 vacancies in daycares and basic education represents 30% of the expansion of this movement. Okay, if these built over landfills or contaminated region, eventually with slave-like work, we'll have an effectiveness report, vacancies showing how was the project managed, what kind of look this. Have to be attentive when agendas. Not everything is about bioeconomy. As the business areas thinks I'm working with forest projects, risk is almost nil, but is very high because something happens, you lose your asset.
So we have to harmonize these two actions. We always talk about the taxonomy and the effectiveness, but we do not look at the criteria and procedures that needs to be observed in these bioeconomy purpose driven projects. So it's important to bring these two sides of the same coin. Otherwise, we only talk about results, and it's important to look at both sides. Can I go? I would add almost nothing to what Nabil has said. I would just only compare that the effectiveness and the impact, the same way that we are in the in the moment of transition economy, we have to make an economy that generates actual impact. So what Nabil is bringing is, okay, I have 3,000 spots in the daycare, but how many children are there receiving the food and living a different situation, so we can have an increment of quality of education or whatever it is that we are pursuing with this project. I would only add to that, but I agree totally with Nabil. We are talking about businesses that promote impact. So beyond the financial flows for this economy is what in fact we are leaving as a legacy in the regions that we are working on. Otherwise, we will continue to have 30% with access to water and 70% without sanitation. And we have beautiful numbers of economy, but what is actually changing, we don't see it. Excellent. As Carolina said, and Nabil said it very well, I agree fully with what we said and what Carolina added. But there is one point, converting to what he said. In the case of the Amazon Bank, there are some years that we have been developing this sector of social environmental impact management. And besides the financial balance, we have a social environmental balance that is improving, bringing the information. And of course, of what Nabil said is very important. So what is the quality of what we are doing today in our institutions? All of them are measured, and they will become legal devices so we can regulate this. I think it is exactly in this regard. Try to bring this impact to society, but with quality, without losing the blanket. So don't have to lose a site in one site, and as a result, bring damage to other purposes. This would be my understanding. I'm going to ask questions from the audience. Well, Annelise, I will have to leave the meeting. I apologize for that. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I will be open to the questions. If someone wants to talk to me later, I will leave in the chat room my email, so feel free to send me your questions. I will be available. I apologize for having to leave early because I have another meeting now. Thank you very much, Carolina, for your participation, and I wish you a great deal of success to Santander in the regional initiatives related to sustainability. So thank you very much. Special thanks to Tatiana and Nayan and all the organizers. Thank you. Well, Nabil and Esmar, I will give the questions to you that we received from the people who are watching us. What do you think about new investment thesis focused on the ideas of exponents of economy as Andela Rezende, where intelligent credit does not depend on bureaucracy? Intelligent credit defined as the ones that arrive through test where it needed, with reasonable taxes in the right volume without they overcome paradigms. In this sense, what the financial institutions have done to adequate to the bioeconomy, Amazon bioeconomy reality? Who wants to start? I think Nabil can start. I think that the discussion about the development banks as ours, one of the main points is related to the credit is the access. And the access has many different ways to look at it. The access includes things having access to the financial sector and fair taxes and the adequate deadlines, but there is an important point in a movement that it starts in the 2000 or 2010 or 2012. That is the discussion of linking the funding to reduce bureaucracy to achieved goals. So are the linked goals, you could say that are linked loans related to deadlines. So you reduce the taxes of many different follow-ups or bureaucrats accountabilities, and you start doing something that generates impact. So you link the funding line, whether it is the final beneficiary or you achieve some commitments, environmental or social commitments. That's why we used this terminology. BNDS in the World Cup, when the bank was called to help in the funding processes, we participated in the investment process in the expansion of the hotel sector. In that circumstances, we launched the first linked loans, one of the first in Brazil actually, where we linked if that construction would have international certifications about energy efficiency, the beneficiary, the client, would receive a reduction in the interest rate or a longer deadline to pay. So we have 10 years since then, and this year we advanced in this agenda. At the beginning of this year, we launched a line linked to the deals to stimulate the refineries adhere to this interesting instrument that is related to the Brazilian entity, stimulating that we have this addition, but with more ambitious goals, the commercialization. And we are studying to expand these other sectors, always linking to goals and indicators that indicates an economy with less carbon emissions and less problems, fewer problems related to social issues, and to help the internal governance of these companies. So what we do is to bet on this more intelligent credit is to look at this modality of credit, that is the credit associated with goals reaching or results that does not necessarily have to do with the object of the funding. And a clear example is this: you're funding a hotel, but you ask for the hotel, that customer, to make an inventory of the carbon emissions. If they make an inventory of the carbon emissions, they will have a discount on the interest rate. If they neutralize the emissions, they will win even more. It is a system that gathers different encouragement systems to a more economically environmentally friendly behavior. So what we want is to look at these instruments that are more innovative in terms of linked loan credits. Thank you, Nabil. Well, answering the questions, the essence of the question. Nabil didn't mention the most controversial thing here, but I think the existence of the question itself, because the question says, is when we talk about the flexibilization of the credit, so the credit can reach, in fact, with the right speed. We know that many times the credit does not arrive at the right time and does not contribute significantly, or it does not serve at all. But it is the dream that we all have about this. What Nabil said it very well is that the actions about evaluation of the sustainability aspects, this has been happening somehow. It's a gradual evaluation, of course, but it has been happening. As an example, here in the Bank of the Amazon, today when we get the classification of green economy in the proposal, we have not only different deadlines, longer deadlines for the funding, and higher percentages of participation in the funding. Also, when we have classification as innovation, we have differentiation about interest rate. So far, so good, but I felt that in the questions, there was a concern about the bureaucracy itself, the requirements of guarantees that we know that there is in this financial. Regarding bureaucracy, something that it's important to bring to this discussion and as a clarification for those who are listening to us, many of what is considered bureaucracy for the customer from the bank is because of the regulation of the financial sector and according to the legislation that we have to comply with.
At the end of the day, experienced client, they understand that the bank is doing all the bureaucracy. There's request. Important for us to mention this clearly. Much of this is regulation, legislation. Bank needs to comply with matter of perception of democracy higher arises. We expect that with this evolution, not for the financial system, but for the financial system 4.0, which is our dream, have to be prepared to be slow and gradative for these relationships to continue to be stable as they should. Thank you. Lizzie, can I say something? I think we have something fantastic going on this year that is open banking. Institutions have worked still very little on that with environmental management, but I believe in the near future, the open banking that is starting now in Brazil will generate and lightness per more technology, intelligence, use of information, and for each institution to it alone. What you said is fundamental, but I would like to bring the issue of open banking for us to advance in this. And what you said is perfect. Open banking for most of the population not very clear, but the sharing of information. Many times you're a new client in this bank, but you're a traditional client in the other have this information. Democratization, and Nabil put it very well. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of our panel. We have the material for more than 2 hours, but we have to like to thank Nabil, Esmar, Kadri left, organizes the event, brought light to several topics, issues, especially the banking agenda. Thank you for your participation and the engagement. Thank you. I hope to see you face to face to have some coffee, maybe somewhere in the Amazon. You. Thank you, Annelise, for the joint participation. Very good. You can count on us. Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to participate in the station and learning a lot with has fantastic knowledge and Paulina is very concise as well. And Annelise, brilliant moderation. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'm available not only for new events, but for this coffee that you mentioned. Okay, the coffee is a promise then. Thank you all. Good afternoon.